Who is Rogal Dorn? Rogal Dorn, also known as the Praetorian of Terra, was the Primarch of the Imperial Fifth Space Marine Legion. He was one of the 20 Primarchs created by the Emperor in the earliest days of the Imperium, just after the end of the Age of Strife. Dorn, like the other Primarchs, was randomly transported across the galaxy by the gods of chaos and placed on a faraway world in an attempt to prevent the coming age of the Imperium. During the Horus Heresy, Rogal Dorn oversaw most of the Loyalist war effort and ultimately orchestrated the defense of the Thorn World during the Siege of Terra. He was the first known Lord Commander of the Imperium, ultimately ceding the title to Robot Guilliman. The Chaos Emissary to Lorgar called him the Soldier. Very little is known about Rogal Dorn's youth. It is believed that he was raised on the planet of Inuit in the system of the same name by the Ice Caste natives to the Ice Hives of the world. The patriarch of the clan, the House of Dorn, soon became as a grandfather to him and taught him much of the tactics and survival. Even after he discovered he was not blood related to his grandfathers, Dorn held his memory in high value. He kept a fur-edged robe that had belonged to the man and slept with it on his bed every night. Eventually, Rogal Dorn became the leader not only of his caste, but of the whole world and then surrounding region of space, ruling Inuit cluster as Emperor of the House of Dorn. Intrigued by the enormous station known as the Phalanx, orbiting Inuit, Dorn spent many years reactivating the vessel. 40 years after his grandfather's death, the Great Crusade reached the ice hives of Inuit. Dorn greeted the Emperor at the helm of his enormous phalanx, the seventh Primarch to be found. The Emperor welcomed Dorn and returned the phalanx to his care, making it the fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists. Dorn himself was fiercely loyal to the Emperor and never once sought any favor from him. He exemplified the truth and could never tell a lie, even if it would have aided his cause. Because of this, Dorn's statue stands as one of 4 on Makarage, next to that of Robot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines. Dorn commanded his legion and expeditionary fleets with peerless devotion and military genius. It was said that he possessed perhaps the finest military mind of the Primarchs, as ordered and disciplined as Guilliman's and as courageous as L. Johnson's, but still inclined to the flashes of zeal and inspiration which marked the successes of Leman Russ and Jagati Khan. Indeed, the War Master had said that he esteemed Dorn and the Imperial Fist so highly that he reckoned if the Fist's noted masters of defense were to hold a fortress against him and his Luna Wolves, the resulting conflict would result in a never-ending stalemate. Commonly dressed in armor of burnished copper and gold, Dorn also wore a red velvet cloak and unfurled eagle wing motif. It was heavily present in most parts of his gear, most notably on a decorative section of his armor that rose above his shoulders. He had a stern and naturally unsmiling face, topped with an unruly shock of short, bone-white hair. When the Emperor returned to Terra to build a capital worthy of ruling 1,000,000 planets, Dorn went as well. Always having excelled in the construction of fortresses, he was tasked with designing the defenses for the Imperial Palace. These would prove to be magnificent and would be well tested in the following years. Fulgrim once asked if Rogal Dorn thought it would withstand the Iron Warriors Legion, and Dorn's truthful answer infuriated Protarbo to such a degree they would almost destroy each other in battle years later. Later, upon reflection, Dorn considered his overly competitive relationship with Protarbo to have demonstrated personal weakness, presumably including the exchange which resulted in Protarbo's outburst. Dorn also clashed with his brother Conrad Kurz, having been informed by Fulgrim of Kurz's vision of what would eventually become the Horus Heresy. Dorn kept this secret from his brother until they were on a joint mission. Kurtz was so enraged by this revelation that he attacked his brother and slashed his face with his lightning claws. Dorn would have died if not for his endurance as a Primarch. In the aftermath of the Ulanor Crusade, Dorn and the entire Imperial Fist Legion were recalled to Terra to take up guard stations there as the Emperor worked on his new project. Before the Imperial Fifths could arrive at Terra in full complement, the events of the Horus Heresy overtook them. Stranded for a considerable time by severe warp storms, the Imperial Fifths fleet eventually discovered the badly damaged Death Guard frigate Essenstein, and so learned of Horus's betrayal. At first, unwilling to believe it, Rogal Dorn was eventually convinced by several members of the Eisenstein survivors, notably Captain Nathaniel Garro and Remembrancer Mercedes Olatin, that his brother Horus was staging a full-scale rebellion. Dorn therefore dispatched the bulk of his legion to the Estvan III system on a war footing. He himself returned to Terra with his veteran companies to bring word of the events personally. Declared Lord Commander of the Imperium until the arrival of Guilliman, Dorn was subsequently charged with bolstering the defenses of the Imperial Palace even further, and oversaw the construction himself. He felt he was marring the perfection and beauty of the existing structure in doing this, and regretted it, even though it was necessary. As the Emperor was held up with war within the Webway, Dorn effectively managed the Loyalist war effort, while Malkador, the Sigillite, handled the political spectrum. Dorn divided the Sol system into several spheres of defense, attempting to contain the traitor advanced in the subsequent Solar War. During the Battle of Pluto, Dorn seemingly killed Apharius, Primarch of the Alpha Legion, but lost his trusted Huskarl's commander of the Archimists in the process. Later, Dorn appeared to greet Vulcan when Salamander's Primarch emerged from the Webway. Vulcan sensed that Dorn was mentally and physically exhausted from his duties and the constant bad news, and embraced his brother. Dorn next held a war council with Lemin Russ, Khan, Sanguinius, and Malkador, the Sigillite, during which he revealed that the Ruin Storm was weakening, and intended to exploit this by mustering his forces to the Beta Garmin system until Guilliman and L. Johnson would arrive to crush Horus from the rear. Khan and Russ both disagreed with Dorn's actions, and as Russ left Terra with his legion to confront Horus directly, Rogal pleaded with him to stay. Horus finally struck at the Sol system and brought about the final phase of the Solar War. Dorn by this point had conceived a 5-tier defensive layer based around buying as much time as possible in order to stall for Guilliman's arrival. Commanding from Bab Bastion with his primarily human staff during the initial phase of the battle, as Luna and Mars came under direct attack, Dorn finally decided to unleash the Phalanx into the battle and moved aboard the battle station. However, as they were departing Terra's orbit from the battle, Garviel Loken brought Remembrancer Mercedes Olatin on board the station with urgent news. Dorn, having been given the initial news of Horus's treachery from Olatin years prior, trusted her judgment when Loken informed him that Olatin had to speak with the Primarch. However, this was a trap by Chaos, and Olatin was revealed to have been unknowingly corrupted by Malgahurst years prior. The demon Samus manifested directly aboard the Phalanx, bringing with him hordes of demonic creatures. Dorn and the Imperial Fist aboard the Phalanx fought a desperate battle, with the Primarch even engaging Samus in direct combat and slaying the creature. However, Samus was continually reborn by possessing the bodies of the fallen, and Dorn was ready to order the self-destruction of the Phalanx until Olatin committed suicide, closing the portal from the demons manifested. With the Sol system falling around him due to Horus's attacks, Dorn ordered that Admiral Noria Sukhasan take the Phalanx to the outer reaches of the system, while he returned to Terra to command the defenses of the world for Horus's coming attack. During the final battle in Terra's surface, Dorn was charged with the overall command of the defenses of the Imperial Palace, personally commanding the effort from the Bastion and later the Sky Fortress. During the early stages of the battle, he attempted to maintain a sense of normalcy by allowing the Council of Terra to meet within the Great Chamber of the Centaurium Imperials, but in truth he was completely occupied by the traitor siege. He forbade his brother Primarchs Sanguinius and Khan from leaving the palace walls, and planned to instead bleed Horus's forces in a protracted siege to buy time for Guilliman's expected arrival. However, he later relented on this plan to not allow the deployment of his best troops outside the palace, opening the Helios Gate of the palace and allowing Sanguinius to lead a counterattack by the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, and Legio Saria to rescue the imperial army, conscripts being overrun outside. During the Battle of the Terrace Lions Gate spaceport, Dorn put Ron in charge of the defenses. He was later forced to send Sigismund to lead in reinforcements. During this period, Dorn confronted Euphrates Keeler over his proto-imperial cult, but the future saint refused to back down and insisted she would lay the defense of Terra through faith. She desired to send Sigismund on a crusade to slay Abaddon, something which infuriated Dorn. Later, as Sigismund faced death at the hands of Khorne and traitors overrunning the spaceport, Dorn took to the field himself to allow time for the Loyalists to withdraw. He easily bested Khorne, swatting away the chosen of Khorne like an insect. It was then that Pertarbos set down on the field from Iron Blood, and Dorn attempted to goad the Lord of Iron into a personal duel in order to buy time. However, Perturbo refused to be baited by Dorn's taunts, promising to only slay his brother after Terra's defenses had been subdued. Dorn responded that Perturbo had spent an immense amount of lives to merely take the first wall, and many more awaited. Despite the fall of the spaceport, Dorn was not distraught, as he had held it longer than he expected and knew all that mattered was to hold out until Guilliman's arrival. After the fall of the Lion's Gate, the strategic situation for the Loyalists worsened, and 4 key areas were now threatened: the Colossi Gate, Centurion Gate, the Gorgon Bar, and Eternity-walled spaceport. However, the Loyalists only had enough resources to defend 3 of these sites. Dorn was thus faced with the difficult decision of abandoning one and its defenders with it, eventually choosing the spaceport while stopping Kiro Sinderman from a possible suicide attempt. The Remembrancer's words made Dorn realize that he had overlooked the flaw in the Saturnine Gate that Perturbo could possibly exploit. Dorn thus set a trap for the traitors at Saturnine as he prepared to abandon the Eternity Wall spaceport. At the height of the Battle of Saturnine, Dorn saved Sigismund from his fallen brother Fulgrim, the 2 Primarchs coming to battle. With Fulgrim in his human state, Dorn was able to resist his constant goading, match his swordsmanship, and land mortal blows. However, Fulgrim quickly regenerated and laughed off the damage. Dorn then informed Fulgrim of his trap and that Abaddon's subterranean assault had failed. Fulgrim became fed up with his allies and quit the battle, though not before summoning his elite guard, led by Eidolon, to assassinate the Primarch. With the help of Sigismund, Dorn was able to survive the battle. His next took direct command of Shard Bastion among the Mercury Excellent kill zone, organizing defenses against the massive Legio Mortis assault alongside 400 Imperial fists. 3 months into the siege, Rogal Dorn had not slept or even rested for a single moment. The strain finally caught up with even his superhuman biology. He began to slow. Admitting the war effort was lost, he nonetheless continued his work and did not oppose when Khan launched a counterattack to retake the Lion's Gate spaceport. While admiring Khan's ultimate achievement and seeming sacrifice, he did not think to recapture of the port would change the battle's outcome. Dorn later joined the Emperor and Sanguinius in the assault on the Vengeful Spirit, Horus's flagship. Helping bring the bodies of the Emperor and Sanguinius back to Terra, he was among those who received the Emperor's final instructions before being interred on the Golden Throne. After the fall of the Emperor, Dorn was stricken with grief. He felt the Emperor's near demise to be his fault and led his legion on a crusade of penitence across the Imperium. He was summoned back to Terra when Guilliman announced the adoption of his Codex Astartes, turning legions into chapters. Dorn was initially outraged at this proposal, feeling that the Imperium blamed him, and rightly so, he thought, for the fall of his brother Marines. But realizing what damage another internal conflict could do to the fragile peace of the Imperium, Dorn agreed. This was a dark period in Rogal Dorn's life. He had both failed the Emperor, and his legion faltered without the guiding light of the Emperor. Some controversy exists about the next event in Rogal Dorn's life. What is clear is that the Imperial Fist cannot be as easily divided into chapters as, for example, the Ultramarines could. The total commitment to the Legion was bred into each Marine, and many didn't wish to form their own chapters. Dorn found the answer to this problem in meditation through self-inflicted pain using a device known as the Pain Glove. The pain-induced vision revealed that his legion had to be redeemed in the eyes of the Emperor, and that the way to salvation was through pain and self-sacrifice. The collective pain needed to cleanse the chapter was decided by Dorn to be an Iron Warrior's fortress, the Iron Cage. Perturbo had built the massive fortifications to mock the Imperial Fist, and Dorn led his most die-hard followers in a siege that would last for several weeks. Followers of the Iron Warriors claim that the Imperial Fist suffered a crushing defeat, and that Dorn and his legion would have been wiped out if Perturbo hadn't prolonged Dorn's suffering so long that the Ultramarines managed to intervene. Imperial records indicate otherwise. The Imperial Fists had always been masters of siegecraft, and even unprepared and at a disadvantage, they fought like lions. Dorn stood as a giant in their midst. His mind clear with purpose after years of doubt and guilt, the Iron Warriors would have had to sacrifice their lives and Primarch to destroy the Imperial Fists, the price they weren't ready to pay. The arrival of the Ultramarines cut the conflict short, and the Iron Warriors fled for the Eye of Terra. The Imperial Fists had suffered staggering losses, but they had proved their loyalty to the Emperor and cleansed themselves of earlier failures. What remained of the Legion was divided into 3 chapters. The most zealous Marines formed the Black Templars, the more rational, newly recruited Marines the Crimson Fists, and the ones most devoted to their Primarch and Legion remained the Imperial Fists. Rogal Dorn spent the next 20 years rebuilding and reforming his chapter according to the standards of the Index Astartes. Rogal Dorn is missing and presumed dead after attacking the Chaos Fleet with a vastly outnumbered force. Seeing the importance of attacking the enemy fleet while they were still preparing, he relied on hit-and-run attacks until his reinforcements could arrive. Dorn went missing on board the despoiler-class battleship Sword of Sacrilege after leading a desperate attack on its bridge. Only his hand was recovered, which is kept in stasis by his chapter. Dorn's skeletal fist is kept within the shrine, the bones intricately engraved with the heraldry of the chapter's previous masters. Only the master chapter has the right to engrave his name upon the bones. Each bone corresponds to former commanders. Left hand, the first metacarpal, Lords Brownin Ambart, Maximus Thane, Kalman Flaudensbog, the first phalanx of the thumb, Ambrosian Spectre, etc. Despite being considered dead by the Imperium at large, Dorn's status remains unclear. During the War of the Battle Beast, the rediscovered Primarch Vulcan stated to Courland that he would speak well of the Imperial Fist to Rogal Dorn. According to Conrad Cruz, however, Dorn is dead and was torn to pieces by the enemy. This fate is foreseen by the Night Haunter when the two brothers met on Nostromo, and is confirmed many years later when Cruz reflects on his past while waiting to be executed by Meshen. Rogal Dorn's primary weapon was the massive chainsword known as the Storm's Teeth, said to have been constructed on Inuit before the coming of the Emperor. For long-range combat, he was equipped with the ornate bolter voice of Terra. This firearm was given to him as a gift of the Adeptus Custodes to honor his appointment as Defender of Terra. For protection, Dorn wore a massive suit of power armor known as the Yorick armor, which was constructed from the same Yorick adamantium alloy as the Emperor's own armor. After several attempts on his life during the heresy, Rogal Dorn was often seen being transported in a specialized thunderhawk known as the Itos Dios. Another device associated with Dorn is the Soul Spear. And, of course, later on in his career, as mentioned earlier, Rogal Dorn took up the Pain Glove as an act of atonement. However, there are some more conflicting sources. In the Index Astartes Part 2, Dorn's death is said to have taken place soon after the disappearance of his brother Corax. This would put his death not long after the heresy and Great Scouring. However, Dorn is known to have died aboard a despoiler glass battleship or chaos ship known as the Sword of Sacrilege. The despoiler glass ship wasn't designed until the mid M36, having originally been an Imperial warship class that fell to chaos. Whether this is an oversight in the class of warship or if Dorn did lead the Imperial Fist for several millennia is unclear.